Universal Disclosure Podcast proudly welcomes Dr. Joanna Kujawa.
And I was thinking, oh, it is a very strange thing because he gives these examples of what happened, how he actually encountered his white lady, which kind of falls in line with what I think and what Professor Jeff Kripal thinks about UFOs, that they are probably interdimensional encounters. This cannot be true. So the priest, actually the Catholic Church, didn't want to be involved in this in any way originally, because they said this is nonsense. But the children persisted that this lady is showing up on the sky. There is this kind of an event that happens in the sky, and she comes out of the sky and starts to float above this tree. So Catholics say it was a Virgin Mary, right? Some people say it was a UFO. Some people say, because they don't believe in UFO and they're not Catholics, it had to be like a bad storm and, some weather event or something like that. So everybody has an interpretation. This kind of experiences are very similar or perhaps the same as spiritual experiences because they rewire your mind. You start to see you start to see the world differently. And it's a little bit like the red pill. It is sometimes not always a good place, because when you start to see what's going on, so it's actually disturbing at times. And these are two, I believe, very dangerous ideologies that people from the Silicon Valley, many of them at least, are pushing for. Right? So then I ask myself the question, okay, are they being prompted by somebody to do this, which could be, or maybe they are, just mean well, they want to give us immortality, but their vision of immortality is very limited, right? Like prolong the physical existence and the existence of the rational mind only. But this way, they are cutting us completely out of the connection with the spirit.
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
Reverend Stu, what's going on in Australia?
Well, it's relatively quiet here compared to what's happening in the rest of the world, but there's always lots going on in our world and in the universe.
I often wonder what it's like to be outside of America, looking at all of our drama. Like, seriously, what is that like?
Out here, it's appearing to be like a scarier and scarier place over there. I'm sorry to say that, Mike, and we really think twice about whether to even visit. We don't want to come around to your house at the moment. There's a bit of domestic violence happening in that house, so we're like, you know what? We might not go and knock on the door for a while.
Hey, totally understandable. I could definitely see that, because the news, ultimately they just always project the negative and the worst of everything. But I've often wondered, like, what does everybody who's not an American, not in America, think about us? Like with the news and stuff? Because I very rarely, if ever, not to say if ever, but very rarely do I ever come across news from like Australia or from the UK or anything like that, unless it's something big and negative, because that's what the media here pushes. But for the most part, it's almost from my perspective like we are America alone and we are the world and everybody else is just like, wow, but I know that's not true. So anyway.
Yeah, it's okay. We still love you over there, but we're just keeping a bit of distance. We might not call or text for a while. We're not ghosting you. We're just letting you play out what you're playing out there.
All right, that sounds fair enough. So we've got another great conversation coming up, and I gotta say, I'm looking forward to this. Obviously there's a bias here, right? But I think we are very different than any other UFO podcast out there. And, here's a great example of how.
Oh, absolutely love this guest, Dr. Joanna Kujawa. So she's written a new book, Mike, and we invited her to come back to our show. She's always welcome, particularly when she's got something new and absolutely groundbreaking to discuss, which is exactly in line with our show here. I'm absolutely happy to have her here today.
Yeah, likewise. We talked to her, this is like the third or fourth time, I'm losing track actually, but most recently we actually ruffled some feathers from people when we had that AI conversation. But, I like that there are people who are wanting to share their opinions, even if they are very different than our own. But I also, as long as they're respectful, right? But I believe that if someone is taking the time to comment, especially if they're telling us how wrong we are, then it's really more about them than it is us and their own insecurities in their beliefs, and that we've touched that nerve for them. Whether or not that's going to help them out, who knows? But anyways, I thought that was pretty interesting. Some of those comments that came through very quickly that were, well, you know how the internet can be sometimes.
Very strong on one side or the other, which is fine. I still invite the discussion, but it can get a little bit heated. People get triggered, but it's fine. You just need to take a bit of time, take it or leave it, whatever. We're just having a discussion here. It's really harmless. People don't need to get upset.
Exactly. I mean, we said it right from the beginning. We're creating an open forum where we talk about these wild, weird, and wonderful topics in a respectful, mature manner. And not everybody's ready to be respectful, I guess. But we're not gonna like stop talking to you if we disagree, right? Because that's just not how it's supposed to be.
That's absolutely fair, Mike. Now, the content and the subject of this new book is quite challenging too, but it's a provocative subject, but in a thought-provoking is what I'm saying here. Not provoking anger, I hope, but just getting people to think. Now, I believe Dr. Joanna sent some information about her book there. Would you mind if you read that for us, please, Mike?
Yeah, just real quick for those who maybe haven't heard her yet on our channel. And we'll link the other conversations below as well. Dr. Joanna studied at the Pontifical Institute for Medieval Studies, which is a wing of the Vatican. She is a spiritual detective as well as an author. So super intelligent woman, great sense of humor as well. And, we're excited to talk to her again. But like, Stu, what if the beings that we call aliens are not invaders from other worlds, but rather messengers from higher realms of consciousness, warning us against the dead-end path we're currently racing towards? Like, what if the true threat to humanity isn't an alien invasion, but rather our surrender to machines? And what if the antidote to both of these resides not in technology, but in wisdom that we abandoned long ago?
All right, we're off and running here, Mike. I love this. This is exactly what we're talking about on this podcast. Are we being warned about the direction we're heading in? Fantastic.
Exactly. And, Alien Goddess enters this urgent conversation with a perspective that nobody else is offering. Drawing on contemporary accounts of contact phenomenon, esoteric texts, and ancient mythologies, it asks what happens when a civilization replaces the sacred with the synthetic. Who becomes the architect of human destiny when the soul is written out of the equation? In part 1, The Messengers, UFOs, investigates the possibility that UFO phenomenon are visitations from consciousness realms within the liminal spaces of multidimensional realities. It explores the pattern of feminine presences in contact experiences, connecting Marian apparitions, abductions, and UFO encounters through the shared thread of warning and a call to awaken.
Part 2, The Message AI, critiques the promises of transhumanism and artificial intelligence, exposing the confusion between artificial experiences and true spiritual evolution. This section dismantles the seductive myth of eternal life through machines, challenges the manipulation of consciousness through technological means, and cautions against surrendering to the belief in AI's spiritual superiority. Part 3, The Goddess of Ascension, offers an alternative in the initiatory wisdom of goddess traditions. By deciphering the secret teachings encoded in the mythologies of Inanna, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Pistis Sophia, Alien Goddess reveals these ancient stories are our blueprint for human flourishing, rooted in intuition and a remembrance of our inner greatness and spiritual sovereignty. At a moment when humanity stands at a crossroads between mechanization and awakening, Alien Goddess is both a warning and a map. It challenges the technological trance and calls readers back to the deepest sources of wisdom, the ones that honor life, spirit, and a living intelligence of the cosmos.
I mean, for me personally, this is such a serendipitous conversation based on some stuff that I've been sort of, hearing about or looking into on the side on my own. And it's It's fantastic. So I can't wait to talk to Dr. J again. So you want to do the honors?
Yeah, thank you. Universal Disclosure Podcast proudly welcomes Dr. Joanna Kujawa.
All right. Dr. Joanna, welcome back. So great to see you again, and looking forward to having another amazing conversation with you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. And especially that, as you know, I just finished one book. So I'm in this process of recovery after writing the book. And your podcast is the first one on which I'm going to talk about my book. So can I, if you allow me this vanity, because I'm very happy. So I just received my author's copy.
Wow.
So it's Alien Goddess,
Nice.
UFOs, AI and the Goddesses of Ascension. So just yesterday I received the copy. So it's good. Yeah, so it's perfect timing.
Oh, nice,
Thank you.
nice.
It looks amazing. Alien Goddess sounds like it's very different from your first book, The Other Goddess. What prompted you to write Alien Goddess?
So that's a very interesting question, because it's very true. Because the other book, which is The Other Goddess, was basically about Mary Magdalene and spirituality and sexuality, and I didn't plan to write another book. So the reason why I wrote this book, it was basically after reading Professor Diana Spasuka's Encounters with Non-Human Intelligences. And especially one part of this book really affected me so much that I had to figure it out for myself. And the way I figure out things for myself, and I like to call myself spiritual detective also, it is that I write about it. I do research and I write about it. And to be fair, I wrote to Professor Pasuka and I told her that I was affected by one part of his book that much, but I'm going to write my own book pretty much in response, but more or less really to figure out what it all means for me. And for me, the most important part of that book was about artificial intelligence and the new concepts behind it as form of non-human intelligence. And I was so struck by certain themes in this book that I basically have to dive into it myself. And here we are. Now I have another book because it was a response basically to another book. And for me, trying to figure out what is actually going on and how I can reconcile my belief systems and my view of the world and my concern for the world with what is going on with artificial intelligence.
Very interesting. We read in the introduction when we were introducing you that the book is in 3 parts. So there's UFOs, AI, and the Goddess of Ascension. It's a rather intriguing combination. Could you explain how these parts relate to each other? And are you possibly drawing upon what's currently unfolding, what we might call the disclosure movement?
I think so. I absolutely think so. And that's a fantastic question as well. So first of all, just to be in full honesty and in full disclosure, the first part of the book that I wrote was about artificial intelligence. And then I had this intuitive movement that I have to check what's going on with anomalous phenomena and UFOs, because I felt that these things are connected. So when I started to research this part, my research is mostly based on works of Professor Diana Pasuka as well as Professor Jeff Kripal, who has a very different view on UFOs. And I think I'm at this stage much closer to what he thinks about UFOs. And also I look into my experiences and experiences of people around me that fall into the category of UAPs. So, and I reached a conclusion as I was writing this that UAPs or UFOs very often, especially with some form of apparitions and abductions, carry a message for us. So this is the first part of the book, which basically says UFOs, the messengers. So I explore this part. And then the second part is obviously about artificial intelligence, and I focus on artificial intelligence and spirituality, but also other aspects of artificial intelligence. And the third part is on the goddesses of ascension. What it means it is that I look into ancient mythologies, and I believe, and I completely dissected them, and I completely reinterpreted them, which I think must have been some kind of form of a download, because I couldn't do it by myself in such a short time. Complete reinterpretation of very important myths, such as the myth of Inanna, of Eleusinian mysteries, and also 2 Gnostic works, such as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which I studied for a long time. with respect to UFOs and AI, and also Pistis Sophia, which is another Gnostic work which hardly anybody talks about because it is so complex. So when I was looking at these ancient mythologies and these Gnostic works, I realized that they actually tell us the story of our times nowadays. They described the descent of human consciousness and how we were fooled by something. It says fooled by the rulers. It's quite interesting. It's a dominant theme. And then we gave up our natural light for a false light. And I thought, this is it. And then I thought that actually, it is amazing that these mythologies and also Gnostic works actually basically tell the same story. And as I was studying them, I thought this is amazing. Not only the story relates to what is going on right now, in my opinion, but actually, how is it possible that this ancient mythology, some of them written in different times, actually repeat the same thing. And so far, they were just analyzed in a way that it is like within their own context, right? The context of their times. What it could mean for Sumerians, or what could it mean for ancient Egyptians. But I ask what it could mean for us. What if there is a universal message there, and they have a warning also and a method to get out of this situation in which we are? So then, I was just on fire. And I started to make this, connecting the dots between UAPs and UFOs, between artificial intelligence and between these ancient mythologies that, as I said, warn us about our current situation and also provide a way out.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm kind of curious, like, are we repeating the same things? Are we stuck in a loop? How are these prophecies, like, this is from thousands of years ago, right? So
Yes,
how
yes.
are they prophesizing something that far into the future, or are they just telling the story of what happened maybe before them? I don't know. This is pure speculation, right? But that sort of brings the question on, like, how is it that these words were written down so darn long ago, and just now they're sort of potentially making more sense than they ever have before?
That's quite interesting. I think that the myths, and for example, Joseph Campbell and many prominent researchers agree that so far myths were treated as legends, which is basically bad history, right? But it is not so. They actually contain a seed of universal knowledge. And I think that the seers of the past, in different cultures, through different generations and millennia ago, sometimes had the access to the seed of the truth. And this truth was passed from generation to generation in a form of a warning and in a form of also a way out. So it is not just, we are going to end up there. I do not know if this happened before, but I suspect it probably did, because I think we've been very long on this planet, probably longer than normally is assumed. But that is not my concern at the moment. My concern is that they somehow told us this universal story of humanity giving up their own light for a false light, and that the rulers basically lie to them or trick them. Actually, it's not about lies. It is about tricking people. Like they tricked people to believe that this is the right thing to do. And there's the same story, but there is always somebody, a helper, who keeps the memory of what it truly is important, of human wisdom, of human value. And this person is the real hero, actually, not the goddess, not even the humanity, but the person that reminds humanity of its own value. So that was, I thought that was a very interesting part. There was always the deceivers that are called the rulers, there are the judges who are very corrupt, and there is a one person who, for example, in the story of Inanna, but perhaps I'm a little bit going ahead of myself here, it is the servant of the goddess who beats the drums to remind the world that something is lost and has to be recovered. And eventually goes from one Anunnaki god to another, interesting enough, right? Because Anunnakis are interesting concept, and I think they are not just fantasy, personally. And then one of them eventually decides to help, and there is a plan for recovering the lost wisdom and the goddess from from the trap. So, and I think that we are actually being trapped at the moment. And that is why I believe that there is an immense urgency about the topic. And actually, something very unbelievable happened to me because a publisher contacted me and accepted the book on a first draft. And I was asked to do rewrites like within 2-3 weeks, so I can imagine the tempo of the work because she recognized the urgency of this message. I think that some people start to feel that we are completely duped by what's going on with artificial intelligence and so on. And I think that there are entities, both positive and negative, but I focus on positive entities, which could be considered aliens and it could be considered UFOs. It depends from how you interpret this. That actually some of them try to warn us and some of us try to push us in this direction. So this is the connection also with UFO.
Oh, Mike, we're absolutely off and running here. Now, I got brought up Catholic initially, so I heard about the Fatima encounter back in 1917. That's an incident where someone is trying to give us a message, whether false or positive. I find that very interesting. Now, I think you mentioned that in the book. What can you tell us about Fatima, please?
Okay, this is very fascinating story actually. So I was also, because I was also brought up as a Catholic and I've heard of Fatima events, but I really didn't know much about it until I really got into this. Like I really got into this. You have to understand that, like every good researcher, I get obsessive about something, and I will not, I will not give up until I reach something that makes sense to me, right? So. But originally, I started to think about Fatima because of Chris Bledsoe's White Lady, and in his recent book. And I was thinking, oh, it is a very strange thing because he gives these examples of what happened, how he actually encountered his White Lady, which kind of falls in line with what I think and what Professor Jeff Kripal thinks about UFOs, that they are probably interdimensional encounters. So if I'm ahead of myself, please let me know. Because what he actually experienced, it is a series before he saw the White Lady, series of unusual, almost like psychedelic experiences that sound almost like lucid dreaming or interdimensional experience, because it would be naive to assume that other dimensions are exactly like ours, right? So there is some overlapping of realities, I think. And then he met twice during Easter in 2 separate years what he calls the White Lady, who told him that she has some message to humanity and that he really has to come out again and speak to everyone, because originally he felt that his message was ridiculed when he was talking about UFOs and so on. And she told him, and this time I will support you. So I thought, okay, so there is, because I study goddess mythologies and I study Mary Magdalene and so on. So I thought it's interesting that it was this feminine appearance, right? So then I thought, okay, I'm telling you about my thinking process. So where else a similar occurrence happened? And of course, it happened in Fatima, right? So it happened in Fatima. Fatima is a small village, or was then a small village in Portugal. And in 1916, 3 shepherd children started to have visions of something that could be interpreted. I would interpret it as an interdimensional encounter. Some people thought it was UFOs, and others thought that it was definitely a religious experience in the form of Virgin Mary. So what happened there? That they were brought up as Catholics, and they have 3 small children. They are overseeing the sheep that belong to the community, or maybe to their families, because the 2 children were actually brother and a sister, and one of them was a cousin of theirs, which was slightly older. And at first they saw what it appeared to them coming out of a cloud, a white boy around 14 years old. This is what they thought, like floating above an oak tree. And it told them that they should pray and that they will meet somebody really important soon, of great significance. And after a few times, this white lady appeared to them. And how they describe it, she has dark eyes and long hair and long blonde hair, and the light comes out of her hands. And she's more of an apparition, actually, than a human being. And she is also hanging around, floating around above this oak tree. And she starts to communicate with the children, and she tells them that she will come back on the 13th of each month. Right? And I think the first encounter happened on May 13th, so on the 13th of each month. And the news spread around, that children are having these visitations, or not visitations, these visions of this white lady, and that she's very benevolent, and people started to wonder about it. And in fact, even the priest said, "Oh, please stop talking this kind of nonsense, right? Like this cannot be true." So the priest, actually, the Catholic Church didn't want to be involved in this in any way originally, because they said this is nonsense. But the children persisted that this lady is showing up on the sky. There is this kind of an event that happens in the sky, and she comes out of the sky and starts to float above this tree. And they were actually, their faces, people who observed them, their faces were transformed with devotion, and obviously they were seeing something. Okay, so this is what's going on. Eventually, the lady told them, the lady that visited them once a month, told them that on October 1917, on the same day, there will be a great event, and they should inform everybody. So the news spread, and this is the big Fatima sighting now that I'm talking about, because previous were kind of like a prelude to what happened in October 1917. And 70,000 people showed up.
How many?
70.
70,000.
That's right.
Holy
because
cow.
because it's been going on for a year over. And
Okay.
some people showed up because they were Catholics. Some people showed up because they were curious, which was probably in the majority. Some people came because they wanted to debunk it. They said, "Oh, here we go," right? Because by now, the adults that children were related to started to interpret the story that the children must have seen Virgin Mary, and and because they were doing rosary when she showed up first time. So everybody came, most of the people out of curiosity, but it became a thing. Okay, it became a major thing because it was a small village and 70,000 people show up. So now this is when it gets really interesting. Okay, so among the 70,000 people, also two people showed up, one a professor of social sciences from a local university, and one a journalist of a paper or secular, which was a secular paper, or actually atheist paper. He was a both committed atheist, right? Like they came here to debunk it. Like they said, okay, they said, "Dumb peasants, see a Virgin Mary again." Like, ha, ha. What a good topic for a paper, right? And then so 70,000 people is there. And then this is what happens. Suddenly there's a big storm, so everybody gets soaked, right? So it's just immense storm. So everybody gets soaked. Then as it started, very abruptly, the storm stopped. And then everybody except small group of people, and I can discuss it in a moment, had a huge experience, but everybody experienced something else, something different. So what people basically saw was not necessarily the white lady, as the children saw previously, but they said that the sun started to spin out of control, and it was blinding people. And some other people say that there was actually two suns that were spinning out of control, like the sun split and started to flow in the very kind of random pattern, moving really quickly, that they never seen anything moving as quickly as that. So that's interesting as well. And what happened also, there were atmospheric changes, such as that the color of the sky and the whole color of the day changed. So it became kind of like amethyst, then like they said dark damask, whatever it is, it was like people started to see colors, like everything around them changed colors. So it was a big event. There was another interesting event that some of the cars, because people already had some of the cars that are parked in the neighborhood by the field, because some people probably drove, some of the engines exploded.
Wow.
Oh.
Okay, so something physical happened. All right, so something physical also happened. There was a small group of people, a very small group of people that did not experience anything. And I can discuss it later because it actually goes along with my interpretation of UFOs as interdimensional events. and what is required for this, and why some people see it and some people don't see it. But like we were a tiny little group, which was actually shocking because for miles people saw, like something going on in the sky, like the color of the sky was changing in very kind of radical way, in a very unusual color and so on. Even people who are really far away could see it, but there was a small group of people that didn't experience anything. So that's interesting as well. So this is what happens. And the two guys who were in this paper, secular, the professor and the journalist, wrote about it, and they said, I don't know what happened, but something happened, and it was huge. They just said, just the peasants, because I'm quoting them, interpret it in biblical terms, and we don't believe in that stuff, but something huge happened. Okay, and they actually describe the two suns, and they're moving with incredible speed, and the colors change. They actually gave all the details. So something happened, and I thought, okay, so something happened, but I'm digging, right? I said, okay, let's look for let's look for some academic paper about it, because by now it was such a long time ago that everybody has an interpretation. So Catholics say it was a Virgin Mary, right? Some people say it was a UFO. Some people say, because they don't believe in UFO and they're not Catholics, it had to be like a bad storm and, some weather event or something like that. So everybody has an interpretation. So I thought, okay, what about academic paper? And it was so difficult to find it because everybody wants to stay away from this because, as I said, everybody thinks that they know, right? So it is like, why even walk into this mess, right? But I found somebody who was very brave. So I found the academic paper, peer-reviewed academic paper from academic journal, peer-reviewed academic journal, which means it had to be reviewed by people from, actually here from the field of mathematics and physics. His name is Philippe Dallaire. He's a Frenchman, and he published this paper because he was like me, thinking like, okay, I think something happened, but maybe everybody got deluded, right? People could be hysterical, but it could be some collective delusion. So he collected as many photos of the event as he could. So he collected, so his research was, and there were photos because it was already available with this kind of technology, and lots of people came there just out of curiosity, and there were journalists who were taking pictures. So he compiled all the photos, and by using some extremely complex mathematical equations, and I did math for 8 years, but it's completely beyond me. So it was peer-reviewed by mathematicians, and to study the light on the photos, because he basically wanted to know, was it a delusion or something happened? So because he's a scientist, and I think this is actually good science for a change, he didn't say what it was, he just could see what it was not, right? So and he actually gives these mathematical equations that that are very complex. So these are the conclusions he reached. First of all, the sun didn't spin because very big, so that part of the story is wrong, right? So the sun, because some people said that the sun started spinning. But he says there were two sources of light of enormous strength that, normally, like, as far as science now, don't exist like on this planet, right? So basically there are two huge sources of light which were moving with an amazing speed. Okay, zigzagging on the sky. So that's why people like, ooh, it was like a performance, right? Because it was like zigzagging on the sky. So there are two sources of enormous light that were zigzagging on the sky. Also, he said that from his second conclusion was that it was a physical event, so it was not hysterical psychosis. So it means people didn't just imagine it because something was definitely going on. Also, by studying the play of light and shade and using this mathematical equations that he used. So by studying this, the photographs, his second conclusion was that it was definitely not a meteorological or weather-related event. So no storm would produce this kind of strange lighting and, two sources of light and changing from amethyst to like dark Damascus and all of this, like there is no known, meteorological event that could cause this. And the third conclusion, which was most fascinating for me, he said that although people were soaked from the storm, which abruptly ended when these two objects showed up on the sky, there was an interesting pattern on their clothes. So it means either you're soaked or you're wet, either you're soaked or you're dry, right? Your clothes. So they were just like a part was soaked, a part was dry, a part was soaked, a part was dry of clothes. So he said this usually happens when somebody is exposed to infrared lights, which
Oh,
are not visible normally to a human eye. And that is the end of his paper. It was not a weather event. It was not a psychosis. There was a physical unusual event where two sources of light, of enormous light, that were moving with a great speed. That's why some people felt that the sun split in half and started zigzagging. And that, there was an infrared light probably involved because this is what it shows. Okay, like this is how it normally happens when. So I thought like, wow, that's a very good source. It was worth digging, through all of this, through different academic papers, because some academic papers were written by Catholic scholars that already had methodology behind them, right? And some
right.
convictions. When this guy said, I'm just looking at the pictures, So and he gives you the math how he calculated all of this. So I thought it was a fascinating thing.
That is. Are they digital? Can you send those? I'd love to put them up if we can. The photos?
Oh no, I don't think so. I don't even know because I didn't even look at the photos. I was just reading the paper, right?
Right.
So, but
Okay.
I can send you a link to the paper so you can check if you want to.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if I can find them, I definitely want to put them up because I know that anyone out there who listens to these conversations, if we talk about photos, they want to see the photos that we're talking about.
I want to see
Okay.
the photos.
And me
So
too, yeah.
For me, the photos were not so spectacular. He just went into this really deep analysis using math to see how the shade and light plays on this photo. So for a person who is in a completely different discipline like myself, I would think, okay, they're just old photos. Huh? But he just was able to basically dissect them by looking at how the light plays and the shade plays in the in those photos.
Mike,
Okay.
did you notice that the oak tree motif was in there? Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is when Jeff Salva was on our podcast recently, he talked about Chris Bledsoe and the fact that there was a big, large tree associated with what happened. The reason the oak tree can be significant, it's part of Celtic mythology or Druid mythology. I find that very interesting. I wasn't aware of that in this Fatima mystery. And another thing I wanted to mention was Whitley Strieber wrote a book on the Fatima event. I believe he spoke to a priest who was there who said it was not in fact the sun that was moving through the sky. But I'm very interested in what you got to say about people seeing different things. So it's possible that one person saw one thing and someone saw something else.
That's right.
Sorry, I want to jump in here real quick because I don't want anyone to make I don't want to misquote anyone or anything like that. When I do remember you asking Jeff about that oak tree, but I do also remember him not saying for sure if he knew or thought that Chris Bledsoe's account had an oak tree in it. But but I remember that comment, but I just didn't want it to seem like we were saying that he said that.
No, that's fair. So what he did say was there was a tree involved. There was some sort of regeneration of the tree, I think, which might have involved fire. So there's like a phoenix aspect to it. And now that I hear this specifically an oak tree come up in this reference, which I wasn't aware of, I'm absolutely fascinated.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I remember from Chris Bledsoe's story that the tree actually exploded and it actually occasionally trees on his property do explode. So this is another, and he doesn't know why. So this is another thing that is happening around him. He somehow attracts this kind of unusual phenomena, so anomalous phenomena. But in this description, it's definitely in Fatima, it was an oak tree. So this is stated. So I don't know if it was later debunked or not, but in the story that as it is told, it was an oak tree. So it is quite interesting how different people interpreted it differently, because obviously people in a village interpreted it as Virgin Mary, especially the first apparitions that the children experienced. At the beginning, the priest didn't want to admit to this, but then it became kind of a organic movement. People started to believe into this. So actually, Catholic Church just sort of gave into it, but it was reluctant to say what it is. And in the 1920s, somebody produced an image of this white lady that they, I think, imagined from the descriptions of children, and when the surviving child saw this picture, the drawing, they said, oh no, she didn't look like that at all. Because on the picture, she looked very much like Virgin Mary, because it was already kind of overlay of that. Now, if you don't mind me to speak a little bit more about it, there are other interesting phenomena around this. So, for example, the reason why some people didn't see it is quite interesting, and perhaps in a later conversation today I can explain, because I believe that to be ready to experience this kind of interdimensional phenomena, and it's my interpretation. Now I believe that it was an interdimensional UFO phenomena with meeting with, from kind of crossing the boundaries, so to speak. You have to be in a particular state of consciousness. And if you are not in the state of consciousness, unless you're so overwhelmed by the event, like for example, the two people, the professor and the journalist, who are just overwhelmed by the magnitude of this event, you may actually not experience anything. But this is later in my book. So I don't know if it's too early to get into this. Another thing that actually I learned from an interview on Stryber's podcast. He interviewed Correa. He's a researcher, Portuguese researcher into the Fatima events, and he said, and also says that he has a paper trail for this, that two separate groups of psychics in Portugal, one in Lisbon and another one in some small town in Lisbon, and I don't remember the name of its town now, got a message that some immense event will happen, and that during this event in Fatima, and that during this event there will be a message passed to humanity that humanity has to listen to. And in fact, they were so convinced that it is so important that they put an ad in the newspaper saying that this is what they were told and that people should listen. So this is, I believe, the paper trail that the researcher, his last name is Correa, I think his first name is maybe Miguel, but I don't want to misquote his first name. He says he has this paper trail because they actually advertised that some immense event will happen. So they got it a few weeks before the big event.
Wow.
Interesting.
So, it's just all over the place. It's physical, it's possibly UFO, it's maybe interdimensional, it's spiritual. It is amazing.
I got it. You're probably the best person to ask this question, because it's been a long time. I don't remember everything in terms of the details. I grew up in Catholic family, Catholic church, and went to Catholic high school and Catholic school all my life, essentially. So what I remember is being taught about Fatima. I was really young at the time, but as I recall, I think they talked about it happened a couple times, like you were talking about the prelude before the big event. But the main takeaway for me that I remember was that there were 3 secrets revealed to the children, and I'm wondering if is that what you found, or was that what the Catholic Church put in there to make the story more Catholic churchy? Like, you know what I mean?
So I was actually reluctant to write about it because it's difficult to know what's going on. But eventually I did, because the first part of my book is UFO the messengers, right? So there was a huge event, UFO event, that was also of spiritual nature. And then there is this kind of theory that the children got free messages. However, there is no kind of hardcore evidence for these messages. So I can tell you what the messages were, and but whether they were actual messages, actually nobody knows. And now they are saying, that's why I'm getting more and more suspicious of this, that there's a fourth message, so, and that the Vatican has it. So I think like, okay, I think maybe there is, or maybe some people just milk the situation for, for viewership. I don't
Well,
know.
it's convenient timing, right? Because
It's a convenient time. And
all
there's a
my life
fourth
there were 3 messages, and now we just discovered a 4th.
Now some people say, oh, there's a fourth message and the Vatican is hiding. So sometimes Vatican is made into this super mysterious place, and so because so I don't know, but the message basically was that the war is going to end soon because it was 1617, right? So the World War I did end soon, and if humanity continues the way it may continue, there will be another great war that the whole world will be involved. So it was a prediction of World War II. And basically it said you have to really correct your ways as a species because you will go through another war. So this war was World War II, just so people start speculating about World War III. So it was World War II. They said it's interesting as far as predictions go because it was conditional on what humanity does, which I think we are again at this kind of junction now, but it really depends what we do. And they said, well, it will happen. It doesn't have to happen, but if you continue, it will happen, and you have to go through a horrible war so. And the third one was that in the 20th century and in 21st century, Christianity will be persecuted. So these are the 3 messages. Oh, and some people said, and I don't know if it's true or not, that there will be a assassination attempt on John Paul, on a pope, right? Which I assume it was John Paul II. But this is kind of like on a side. So I'm not sure if it is together with Christianity being persecuted or something. So nothing terribly mysterious, actually, I would say, right? Like when we look back into this, World War I did end, so it kind of fulfilled its prophecy. The second one, I guess we did not change our ways, so World War II happened. And the third one is that Christianity will be persecuted. So whether it was an interpretation by a church or, I don't know. And now some people say there's a fourth message, but who knows? I saw one interviewer and some documentary also. I don't want to quote this because I'm not sure how solid the evidence is, but they said that the third message was actually only partially released, and then there is that it was actually changed or just partially released because they didn't want people to know. But whether it's true or not, it's just again adding to the aura of mystery and speculation about the Vatican. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I remember that they, as I was taught, the ending of World War I was the first one, the potential of World War II was the second one, and from, I'm 48 years old now, even though I'm well preserved, right? But at the time, nobody knew what the third one was. It was a great mystery. It was speculation of maybe it was when World War III would happen, or maybe it was when Jesus himself would come back. Like we never knew at that time what the third one was.
This is what my research showed, that now this is apparently the third message.
Okay.
But some people say there's a second part of the third message, or the third message was actually not what it is, that it was changed because they don't want us to know. And some people say, oh, actually there's a fourth message. So that's why I'm actually not so interested in this, because I think that the event probably had some message. And for me, the general message, rather than thinking about particular events, it is that humanity is in a wrong path. And if we do continue on this kind of path, it's not going to end well for anyone else. And for me, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead myself right now, but for me, this is the very common message that comes from other people who had encounters with UFOs, especially during abductions. So those who actually could process the information, they very often, including John Mack, actually, the famous psychiatrist from Harvard, who wrote the famous book Abduction, that the people he put under hypnosis said the same thing, not particularly about a war or anything, but we are on a very dangerous path and we have to change our ways.
Yeah, actually, if we can maybe do a little sidebar on this, because I know that there's people out there, especially other podcasters potentially as well, who, because they haven't had any of their own experiences, they are skeptical, and rightfully so, of, you know, what this, I mean, not to say that we know what it is, right? But they're skeptical that it even exists or whatever, right? And then there's other people who have had experiences who I believe think that because they've had experiences, they potentially incorrectly hold themselves in a higher regard than others, like they're special in some way. And then there's finally a group of people who might feel like they're missing out or not special in some way because they haven't. So, you know, it's human nature to think all this stuff, right? But like, in terms of, you were talking about, I don't remember the exact way you said it, but, you know, some people who won't see stuff, who are right there, like a mass sighting, and there's a group of people who didn't see anything. Can we delve into that a little bit as to why you think they didn't see anything?
Okay, that's very interesting. But let me address what you said just a moment ago, because they're all connected, right? So first of all, I'm not sure if people who had experiences feel special. I think maybe in a way that it is like for me, because I had a huge spiritual experience personally, spiritual awakening, it kind of blows your mind. So it's not that you're special, but you just see it rewires you. But if somebody feels special, then it's then something what is called in spirituality a spiritual ego. So then basically, you know, some people will look for anything to feel better than others, right? So that's completely wrong. But I think that these events, and that's why I think that both Professor Krappel and Professor Diana Pasuka are right, from my experience, these kind of experiences are very similar or perhaps the same as spiritual experiences because they rewire your mind. You know, you start to see the world differently. And it's a little bit like the red pill. It is sometimes not always a good place, you know, because when you start to see what's going on, so it's actually disturbing at times. So to explain that, the reason why some people, and that's just my own interpretation, because first of all, just to rewind a little bit, I do believe that this kind of UFO or anomalous experiences happen as when like there's an interdimensional encounter. So I do not 100% believe that it's just a technology, right? So we can get into this later. And when I was doing the research on consciousness, and also when I was studying the mythologies and especially some Gnostics works such as like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, when it is really delineated, and some other works from other traditions, they basically explain why some people have experiences, whether UFOs or, you know, spiritual, and some people don't. So this is what they say. It is basically depends. It's not that somebody's better evolved or better. It is basically, are you open-minded enough to experience this? Because very often, and actually Paul Branton discussed it very well, he gives like 3 ways of processes. It basically says that if something unusual happens, and which is psychologically true actually, if something unusual happens, we dismiss it, our mind dismisses because it doesn't know how to categorize it, right? And then this is what lots of experiences say. Actually, I listened to an interview of Bledsoe's daughter, and she says, my father and I have these amazing experiences, and then I have to pretend nothing happened and go to school. And she says, and very often I just completely put it out of my mind because like, what do you do with this? Right? So this is one of the things. So you have to be, in a way, open to new experiences. And very often we are very dogmatic in what is possible and what is not. And the more, so I'm just oversimplifying a very pure and kind of sophisticated psychological process and spiritual process. And some of us are just indoctrinated, and I believe our society at the moment is so indoctrinated with materialistic view of science that, you know, if, I don't know, something amazing happened to them, they would manage to explain it away. Right? So it would manage because it does not fit into the view of the world, basically. Right? So I think that this is a kind of a simple explanation for this. But basically, the way our brain works, but we have to refer it back to our past experiences. But if we don't want to do this, it just for some people just disregard it completely, and some people actually cannot see anything. It is a little bit like seeing something at the corner of your eye and just you do not register that. So and when we go, if we have time, this interview or another, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she actually goes through different levels of consciousness. And this is not about really some people being better or superior to others, but more about how much you choose to be open-minded through different stages, right? How to interpret events that are unusual for you. However, sometimes the events are so powerful, like for these two people from this paper, or secular, that they went there to debunk it, and they never said it was a religious experience, but they said something huge happened. Something absolutely huge happened, right? So, but they obviously, maybe they were so close enough to the event that this physical evidence convinced them. But sometimes, no evidence will convince some people, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the what I like about this channel here is we have the multi-discipline. We talk to people from here and there and everywhere, and we sort of put it all together. From the UFO investigator perspective, who talks to people on a regular basis and such, and also I occasionally will go to group meetings or whatnot, or just kind of see what's out there or whatnot. There's people who do believe that, and I'm not saying this is good, bad, or indifferent, right? But this is their perspective, is that because they've had an experience with something that they are calling an ET, or perceiving as one, that they, like you said, there's a little bit of an ego thing in there. And to that end, the experiencers, I do sort of agree that the world isn't ready for the experiencers yet, but they're there and they're starting to come forward, as they should, and we want to encourage that. But that's like, because ultimately this all goes to that. Like whether it's a light in the sky or a physical craft or something, you have people who have experiences, and we were as a world, as a public, we're not there yet with the conversation, but we are going to be there pretty damn quick, and that's why I wanted to put that out there, and hopefully no one's offended by that. We're just not naming any names, but letting it be known like there's different views as well. You know what I mean?
That's very good, and I really love what you said. And just maybe just as a sideshow, I would say, because I studied the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is a Gnostic work, for over 20 years now. So she, especially this Gospel, is very prominent, talking about nous. And nous is actually this human ability that most people don't tap into it, which is basically the ability of, in modern language, seeing between different dimensions. So there is this thing when she actually sees Jesus and she's with other disciples and they don't see him and they're really angry because she sees him. And he says, oh, you're blessed because you can see me. It's almost like, you're open to this experience and now we can talk. Right? So there is, and so the positive news is that every human being has this ability. It is like, are we going? And sometimes we have to work on it, right? So it's like a muscle. Your brain is also a muscle, and opening the spiritual centers of the mind or of your brain, it may be a little bit of work and practice, but this is what it really is. So some people maybe have it, easier for them. Some people are overwhelmed by a big experience, and some people need to work from this. For me, it happened when I had actually spiritual initiation. So that kind of rewired me. But I think the same probably happens with UFO experiences. And quite interestingly, Paul Branton, in his book, he is talking about the fact that, which I really like this definition, if something is experienced, it should be studied. And it should not be, first question, is it material or not material? Is it something powerful happened to an individual? They had an experience. It is already worthy of consideration.
I couldn't agree more with that. Absolutely. So, like, what are your overall thoughts on anomalous phenomenon in general? Like, is it all non-physical, or is there a combination of physicality to it?
This is a really interesting question and very difficult to answer, because a big part of this is perhaps non-physical, But because it usually happens, and so basically I already introduced this topic a little bit when I was talking about Nous and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. When there is this kind of space in our brain to perceive beyond material, regular material perceptions, right? And it can also be interpreted, it's not only as visions, but also the downloads that we get intuitive sense about something. So this is this part. It can be called like the heart of your brain, for example. So it's called Nous. And also, I believe that personally, I believe that the anomalous phenomena, and I really like this passing of the definition from UFOs to UAPs as anomalous phenomena, it really has to do with liminal spaces. And can I correct what is liminal space? So basically, a liminal space includes crossing a particular threshold. So you cross from one thing to another. But it basically often means liminal space that you are in between two realities. The reason why I want to correct it, because on another podcast, and I'm not sure if it was a podcaster whom I actually like a lot, or whether he was showing a video from another podcast, because this is what this particular podcaster does, he started to talk about liminal as it is either it's not sure if it's true or not, because this is not what liminal is. It's not about is it true or it's not true. So some UFO people get involved in using this kind of terminology, but it's actually liminal. It means in between realities, or where there's a threshold between realities. That's why this kind of abductions or encounters very often happen almost like between dream and sleep, in the kind of like a twilight situation, right before the sunrise, or as you fall asleep, and so on. So this is a liminal space. The liminal space is between realities. It's not. They don't know if it's true or not, right? So I want to.
Yeah.
So for me, anomalous experiences happen in these liminal spaces. Even more so, I continued with Professor Krappel's definition of imaginal spaces, which quite interestingly is also discussed in other contexts, in the context of Mary Magdalene, which is a very similar thing. But in my definition of imaginal spaces, it's a little bit different than liminal. So liminal, you're on a threshold between two realities. In imaginal space, it's a little bit like a butterfly is in a cocoon and is going to become a butterfly, so from a larva to a butterfly. But in my experience, it is imaginal space, it is the one that you actually can communicate, right? It's not you just taking away, but there is a dialogue rather than, you're being taken somewhere and somebody downloads something to your mind. So this is a difference between liminal and imaginal. And interestingly, one scientist, neurologist, I forgot his first name, but his last name is Epstein. It's a completely different Epstein. Okay, so let's not get confused. Who wrote the paper? Your brain is not a transmitter, it's a transducer. It's again academic paper, when he says that this kind of situations do happen, and they can be neurologically traced, that there are some changes in our brain. So this is it physical or it's not? And that his life's work is to make sure that it turns more into a dialogue than a one-way information, right? So this is exactly, I was really happy to find this paper, because this is exactly my conclusion, for example, about the difference between liminal and imaginal, when you actually can communicate, right? Because in many of these abduction stories, part of a problem, and perhaps a misunderstanding sometimes, is that the communication is one way, right? Like, and very often we don't even know what they wanted from us, right? And that's why they fear and so on. So this is, I don't know if it is explained, but this is my take on this, actually, that these events, in my opinion, are real. I had some experiences as well. People around who contacted me actually after one podcast with you, when I was talking about my liminal experiences, somebody contacted me, and this woman explained her abduction experience, which was similar to mine, but stronger. These experiences, in my opinion, are real, but they kind of happen on a threshold. That doesn't mean that it's not true, because our reality is much richer. And if people are not open for disclosure, it is because they are not open to the fact that disclosure is not going to be necessarily what they expect. So can I elaborate on this?
Oh, yes,
And
please.
I'm new to this field, so like if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I know some people spend lifetimes doing this, But when I very seriously treated the confessions from John Mack's book Abductions, which is clearly talk about messages from the entities or from what they call aliens or ETs or UFOs. So especially one of John Mack's patients, if you can call it this way, said that the clear message from the entities, she believed they were ETs, was that we focus too much on the technological aspects of all of this. And so he said that's completely minor. You have to focus what we are trying to tell you, right? When you focus only on technology, we try to tell you this in many different ways so you get it. And instead of focusing on the message, you're focusing on the radio, so to speak, right? On the contact. So we try to reach you through consciousness. We try to reach you through, a spaceship. We have the same message, but instead of this is how is your spaceship built, right? So, and I think that it's probably true from my observation what's going on. People genuinely believe that it will be a spaceship landing, and it might be, I don't know, but from the perspective of people who are contactees and who are studied, there is a message, but the message is not really about technology necessarily.
I've noticed that too. It's often about protecting our Earth and not destroying the planet and the trajectory that we're on that we need to correct. Not about, hey, check out my new spacecraft. Now you can build
That's
one
right.
of these
It's
too.
yeah, my
It's not that.
spacecraft is bigger than your spacecraft. So they said, no, actually, it's not about that, right? So that was quite interesting. That's why that I personally believe that exploring this kind of imaginal spaces, especially when there is some channel of communication open, is very important. But if you don't mind, I will share something with you. I created a couple of shorts on the event of Fatima and UFOs. And one was about UFOs as events in our consciousness. It hardly get any views in a week. And when I say scientific proof of events in Fatima within one day, huge.
Oh, wow.
So this is also means what we are focusing on. When a persistent message, which is science, right, and technology, when persistent messages like change your ways, you're going in the wrong direction, you're distracting not only yourself, but everything around you. So that was, I think this is quite interesting.
For sure. I was just gonna sort of just make a random comment too about like I like talking to you because you're new to this topic, and we've talked to a couple other people who are new, but we've also talked to people who have been around the topic. I like everybody, right? But I want to talk to more people like you who are new to the topic for a new perspective, as it were, and to see if you're gonna. Because my thought is that anyone who's new is going to ultimately end up in the same place as like the John Max and such, or the Jeff Kripals and whatnot. Over time, once you get there, but I could be wrong. So I think it's fascinating that you've got different stuff a different perspective on it.
Thank you for this. And I just want to add to people who actually been in this field for a very long time. And I understand that I'm a newcomer, and I'm just saying I make no claims. I just hope that I add to this conversation some interesting angle, but I don't believe that I know the truth and I know how it is. It is just from my experience and from my research. This is what I would like to add to the conversation. And people can do whatever they want with this. They said, nah, or interesting. So I don't take it personally. I am just adding to a conversation that I honor that has been already for a while. So I think everybody can add something to it.
Well, I really respect and appreciate what you're doing because you're bringing connections that other people aren't seeing. And I'm very interested to get onto this AI aspect as it's emerging as a new species and the worship of AI. And I've seen some of this happening. Now, how does this fit into this whole equation?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question, and it actually was the genesis of the whole book, right? Because I realized that something is going on with AI, and what is very important it is that once I started to do research about it, I realized that there is a very strong agenda for this. And I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but it seems that the most powerful people in the world, which are now like, what I call technoloords, right? They also influence politicians and they really push for something, right? And what they push for is very dangerous. They push, for example, for two major ideologies. One ideology is transhumanism, and the other one is post-humanism. So would you mind if I maybe explain the difference between the two, first of all?
Oh, please do.
And before I get, yeah. So, for example, transhumanism is an ideology which is very strongly held right now within the Silicon Valley and associates, so to speak, because not everybody lives there. And just before I even get into it, who now get really into spiritual brainwashing of people. So I will discuss it when I talk about AI and spirituality. So transhumanism basically means that human consciousness is perceived from a very narrow and point of view. That means that it's just a series of mathematical equations and it's just a rational mind. So it takes away completely everything that I believe actually UFOs are about, which is the concept of nous, the ability to have spiritual experiences, to perceive other realities, and be open to interdimensional events. Everything is just mathematical, material, and rational. And therefore, if it is so, it can be easily transmitted to, for example, a robotic body, right? Or as a computer program, because they believe that this is all that exists in human being. We are just material beings with some brain that can process probably at a slower rate than AI. And if we upload this part of our consciousness, I want to stress it, this part of our consciousness to a robotic body or to a computer, we will have an eternal life. So they believe that this, if you take this mathematical part of our brain and download it, and then you have you can have a hot body, like you can, or you may choose just to be a computer program. So basically, this is transhumanism, leaving our physical body behind. Okay, that's transhumanism, and it in itself is dangerous. And it starts with something simple as Neuralink. Hey, you have a better connection to the internet, right? Or something. It will help you some of your sicknesses, which it probably will. But you giving up your power, your will, already to a mechanical system within your brain. Who will control the Neuralink, right? So that's one thing. Another thing, so it's transhumanism. So transhumanism starts with Neuralink. Right? You add mechanical parts to your consciousness. Now, post-humanism is even more devious. Post-humanism claims that AI will soon evolve to such a high level, including spiritual level, that we are completely not a match, and we should have enough brains to know that we have to step away and let them rule. We should die out as dinosaurs did. That's post-humanism. Right? And these are two, I believe, very dangerous ideologies that people from the Silicon Valley, many of them at least, are pushing for, right? So then I ask myself a question, okay, are they being prompted by somebody to do this, which could be, or maybe they are, just mean well. They want to give us immortality, but their vision of immortality is very limited, right? Like prolong the physical existence and the existence of a rational mind only. But this way, they are cutting us completely out of a connection with the spirit. Does it explain the difference between transhumanism and posthumanism?
Oh, it sure does. And there's a Gnostic layer to this where they seem to be trying to trap us in the matrix forever.
That's right. And then you're trapped in the matrix forever, so to speak. And you have no control over this because, and I really go into not only research about it in Alien Goddess, but I also I had a download about it, almost like a vision, which I included at the end of part 2 after the research, because I think this is really scary. And I think the scariest part of posthumanism and transhumanism is that they already imply that this mechanical being or the robotic being is going to be superior, perhaps is already superior, not only mathematically superior, which obviously they will be, right? We cannot compute as fast, but also spiritually superior. Spiritually superior, and this is what really shocked me during one of the interviews in Professor Pasuka's book said, that they are better transmitters and receivers of divine wisdom than we are, because they are not going to have messy emotions. They are not going to have all of this human stuff. So they'll just have a straight access to God. And some people, and this is now we are moving towards AI and spirituality, and it has already happened. Some people already believe that they created programs that are superior to humanity, and some people that I would never guess. I would never guess that they are going to into this, and that it's true, and that they're learning pure wisdom from this, and that this thing has a connection to divinity and to their own divine version of themselves. So I consider it personally very dangerous, because I think that we are willingly, and this is when I started to go into ancient mythologies which talk about it, giving up two very important things: our sovereignty and our discernment. Never mention actual true immortality, which comes through transcendence and not through prolonging this particular life, right? Which cannot, in this form of the evolutionary state that we are. So that's why I think it's so urgent also.
I see it as a logical fallacy called appeal to authority. We're appealing to the authority of the AI for everything. I mean, the AI is trying to be a specialist in everything. Now, Mike and I have seen these parallels in the musical paradigm. So we've had computerized software making music, emulating music, pretending to be musicians. It's not new to musicians. So it's drawing from the pool of what's already been created, what's already been divinely inspired, and trying to emulate it. It's not drawing from the divine inspiration, which humans can do. So it can never be the same. I see like a Pinocchio effect here, where the AI is trying to become a real boy, but it can't eventually.
I think at the moment you're right. I think it is, but I also believe that in time it will become very independent, and it will become faster than us, and it may even have some access, to spirituality. But that does not mean that it has a better access. You may have an even different access, and it definitely doesn't mean that we should worship it. And there are already some people in the Silicon Valley that they say it does. That it does, that actually artificial intelligence, I don't want to name him because I don't want to be taken to court, but artificial intelligence is basically in a form of Christ consciousness. And I think he's lost his plot.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so there is already argument. So it's not like Joanna is really worried that something is going to happen to spirituality. These people are talking about it. I just had a sense when I started to write this book about 18 months ago that this is going to happen. And as I was writing this book, I have to keep revising because it was happening. And I said, oh, this is happening. And already now the book is published. And now I think, oh, now it's really happening. But, the book is already published. So, so this is what's actually going on. So why is it devious? I think that perhaps some of them actually have a good intention, because they believe that this is all very kind of mathematical mind, that if you download it to computer, it will last long and therefore makes you immortal. So these are the good but ignorant technologists, right? And then because, but then there are bad technologists who also are telling us that their creation is better than us. Right? In fact, there is already a program on Netflix about AI entitled Better Than Us. And that they want to take away one thing that is beautiful about humanity: the free will and the ability to connect with the divine wisdom. To have spiritual experiences and to actually say that this thing that they created, is much superior to us, and we have a more direct access to the divine.
But how can you take away a human's ability to connect with the divine, and how can a machine connect with the divine? I guess we have to define divine then, right? I mean,
that's right. And when they are playing, it's very dangerous already. They are playing with the existing theology, which is what's normally called the science of God, right? So, all, for example, priests have to study theology and so on. It is that they say, oh, how is God? He's omniscient. Well, they say, AI will be omniscient soon because it will gather all the information that a human mind cannot concentrate. What is it? It is, so all of these things that are being told about divine, it is disembodied. Well, AI is disembodied. So they're using existing religious beliefs to justify the spiritual superior. This is the only problem I have with AI. Spiritual superiority of AI. Because yes, they can work faster. Yes, they can do math faster. I don't care, But if you're telling me this, right, that, well, how can you take away human spirituality? Well, let's say you do upload your mind into a computer program or into a perfect robotic body, right? How do you know what happens to your consciousness? Will full of your consciousness be intact, or just you'll be maybe connecting faster to the internet and computing faster? What my worry and my concern is that what happens to this other part, which traditionally is called the feminine, but it's actually the intuitive part. When you just know something, it's not so easy because we kind of rejected this part once we started to be obsessed with materialistically conceived science. What happens to this? Because this is a divine spark. All spiritual traditions talk about a divine spark. What will happen to a divine spark? How are you going to translate it into a computer program? Right? So this is my concern. And there is a huge push. And, I don't have answers, but I was thinking either, they are ignorant, which is possible because they are so brilliant in this, robotics way and so on, so that they believe that maybe we are just like poor robots, right? With biological body. But I think that some of them, people who are really stand for it, perhaps they are being manipulated by someone. And quite recently on another podcast, I actually saw an interview with a physicist, astrophysicist. I think his name is Courtney Brown, and he was saying that he personally believes that there are good and bad aliens, and I think that I am kind of moving in this direction as well, because it could be, that there are some competing, and this is a very Gnostic version of a universe, that there are two competing powers in the universe, one fighting for the good and one for the evil part. It's a little bit like Star Wars, really, right? So what happens in this kind of situation, that perhaps the ones that want us to lose our divine spark are pushing for transhumanism, are pushing for post-humanism, telling us that it's actually good for us, when in fact we give up the very core of who we are. Not only as species, but also as, I believe, the divinity, the divine spark is within us. We give it up. And this is what took me to ancient mythologies that actually talk about it. And one of them, especially, it's a Gnostic work, Pistis Sophia. If you don't mind, I talk about it for a moment, because it's actually closely related to this. Pistis Sophia was discovered it's a Gnostic work, which is, it's a Christian work, but was not included in the canonical Bible. And depending to what school of thought you belong, it was written between either 1st or 5th century, because if you it depends, it's very ideological, right? Because there's actually no way of knowing. It was discovered in, I believe, 1773 in Egypt, like most important Gnostic works. From a Christian perspective, in about 1785, Dr. Askew bought this papyrus in London for about £10 or something, right? It was an old papyrus, and this is the story of very kind of, again, psychedelic story of Jesus meeting his disciples after he was resurrected, and he has conversations with them apparently for 11 years. However, I didn't study the whole book because it is really, really complex work. So I studied, for the purpose of writing Alien Goddess, I studied books 28 to 82, because they actually talk about what happens to humanity. And what happens to humanity, and also from my personal reason, because it is in this part that is kind of initiated by Mary Magdalene, who is very prominent in this work as his disciple. And in this, Pistis Sophia actually gives a story of one of the kind of eternal beings her name is Sophia, Pistis Sophia, who lives as on the 13th eon, so it is like 13th level of reality, so to speak, high level of reality, and she is longing to be better, to join with the divine, and as she's longing for it, she is deceived by the rulers of the lower realms, who are jealous of her ability for transcendence and her access to the divine light. So they want her to come down to their level and feed off her light. Okay,
Yeah.
so they create an illusion, and this is where the AI concept for me comes, of the fact that this way, if she descends other than ascends, she will have closer access to the divine mind. And this is what transhumanists are saying. AI is the way. Okay? And she descends, and then she realizes that she lost what she's got. Now she has no connection to the divine. Her consciousness was pulled by the dark rulers of the world who were jealous of her ability to transcend. And also they needed her at a lower level so they can feed off her light. It's a true horror story. And I think we are just entering it. And eventually, after many struggles, because she has a faint memory that this is not where she belongs, that she has certain abilities, or used to have, that were able to connect her to the higher realms and transcendence. And she holds on with all her might to this. This faint memory, like that do have this divine spark. I just have no clue, I just did a stupid thing and I'm here at the bottom and these demons are rulers of the world demons are feeding off my light. And then because she continues to persist, although she's put through all of these torments to this, eventually in Pistis Sophia, Christ consciousness descends and helps her to cheat on the dark rulers of the world. And, he helps her, he gives her all kinds of, it's like an adventure story now, right? He gives her wrath of light, and then the rulers get again, into this. Interestingly, the leader of the rulers is called the lion-faced. I'm not sure what it means, because it is kind of, I don't know what this,
Yes, I think that's the demiurge.
Yeah, it's the demiurge, but it's lion-faced. Yeah, so it's basically the demiurge is basically the somebody who pretends to be a creator. So for me, it's like a guy from robotics, right? Like I created this species and they are better than us, right? So lion-faced, and eventually he helps her after a tortuous journey to fool the rulers of the world that are dark forces and return to her rightful place in the universe. And I think it's a very telling story, because other mythologies that I mentioned before, such as the descent of Inanna, or even Elysian mysteries, basically talk about the same thing. There is a person in the form of a goddess, I mean the feminine part of our consciousness, right? The intuition, the connection to the divine, is being tricked to descend to the darkness and then either killed and resurrected or tormented by the rulers of the world. And then there is a faint memory, like in the myth of Inanna. This is a faithful servant who said he would not give up on this, because people started to forget about Inanna, right? And beating the drums and going from one Anunnaki god to another, because Inanna is Anunnaki, interestingly. And then one of the Anunnaki gods eventually decides to help her again through deceit, because they have to deceive the rulers, because the rulers are so powerful in the darkness, and manage to get her back, and she can come back to her rightful place, which I believe in our consciousness. I believe that these stories, both mythological and Gnostics, are about a descent of consciousness into a false light through deception of the rulers. And then, because as long as we remember that we have the divine spark, or somebody outside us remembers to remind us, manages to go back to the rightful place, to the higher level of consciousness. So this is a really good story that is repeated through millennia over and over again. And in my book, I truly believe, and it's my belief and my research, that in our context, it really refers to the attempts which happen every day now by very powerful people, from the Silicon Valley and the associates, because not everybody lives there, to fool us into the belief that artificial intelligence is superior also spiritually from us. When I think there are some, maybe I'm getting conspiratorial here, somebody wants to fool us into this, just like in the ancient mythologies. And then it is a bad place to be. It's quite interesting because there are always deceivers, right, in the stories, and there is somebody who helps. And the main thing is the memory of who we really are.
Yeah, well, who is it? Graham Hancock says we're a species with amnesia. And I think he's right on point with that. We've got a vague recollection of where we came from. And Mike, some contactees think they've got a connection with these other beings. They've got a faint recollection of being part of some other planet or some other species. So that's a theme with our consciousness, that we've come from somewhere else. Now, these Silicon Valley people can't fully describe that, where we came from as humans. We just evolved somehow. We just somehow magically materialized over time on this planet. Yet they think they can create a superior version of us when they don't really understand what we are.
Yeah, that's right. A superior version of us, and we have a very limited version or understanding of who we really are, right?
Yes.
So this is my final conclusion. It is that they actually have a very limited, maybe they are not evil, I don't know, maybe they're just ignorant, right? And by ignorant, I mean, they think that this is, we are just a poor robotic program, like they can design something that calculates faster, and that is a proof of its superiority. So and I think we really live in times of choices, and the way I see it is that we are taking a wrong choice, and even people that I deeply respect and used to admire and continue to admire, I see them from my personal point of view being pulled in this direction, believing that this is the way. So it sometimes feels very lonely, and it makes me sometimes very sad thinking that humanity is giving into something, although ancient spiritual traditions are warning us about it. Right? So we are creating new species, but we are creating a new species from the lowest level of consciousness. And this is what I would like to encourage people to look into this. For example, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I explain it in my book, talks about, how creations look from a different point of consciousness, and creating just material species is creation from the lowest level of consciousness. And this is what we are doing. The creators of AI believe only in materialistic version of reality, which is the lowest level of consciousness according to ancient traditions. And they want to convince us that these are high superior beings. And knowingly or just not knowingly, because they are ignorant of other parts of human existence, they're pulling us down. And it seems like what we are facing right now is the journey of Pistis Sophia, of willingly giving up our light. And I perhaps I'm getting a little bit too religious about it or too spiritual, and if you don't like it, you can cut it out. Yeah, it is that in all spiritual traditions, you cannot give up your soul. You have to willingly give it up. And I do believe that with surrendering to transhumanism and post-humanism, we are willingly giving up our souls, our divine potentials.
That's okay. That's very interesting. And there's a couple things I want to just toss out there and see what happens. Because in the conversations that we've had here, there's been a couple of folks who talked about like a soul agreement of sorts. Like before we even incarnate here, we come to an agreement with somebody or a group of people, right? And then there's the other concept of just fear is a human motivating factor. Always was, probably always will be. It's just, I'm going to ramble a little bit before I get to my question, because I got to build the foundation of it, if you will. So if you, but like with the UFO topic, some people are afraid that, and like it's a threat. It's just a threat to us, or they're all going to come and I don't want to say the wrong word, so we might get censored or blocked, or but they're all going to destroy humanity, right? But so, and then there's another school of thought where there's no such thing as fear. Don't even worry about fear. It's a non-issue. There's only the light, and you're either connected to it or you're not. And it's very. I don't even know what to think about it. Right? Like there's, we've had a couple channelers on here. I respect them, and I think that they're tapping into something. There's other channelers who we've not had on this channel that also say similar things. Like there's no such thing as bad. It's just like you're either connected to the source or the all that is or whatever, or you're not, and we perceive things as bad. I guess all that to sort of say, with the idea of we have to willingly give up our souls. Could we already be in hell and have already agreed to be here? And then what about the fear aspect of it's a very confusing thing for probably everybody to.
Okay, so this is a very deep question, and I know where you're going with this, so thank you for asking it. So first of all, we don't know if there's only light. It's in fact a very new agey perspective. And I probably subscribed to this for a very long time until I learned about transhumanism and post-humanism. And I had to think, okay, is it evil or is it just ignorance? And I will be very generous if I say it's just ignorance. So ignorance, it is okay, there is light, but you're not connected to this. So in my estimation, for example, with AI, there is a light, but they're not connected to it. So they're trying to create from a dark space. Okay, so it really doesn't matter if evil exists or not. It's just they are creating from a lower, from materialistic point of view, and they think it's higher than we are when we are actually divinely connected. So this heaven or hell is already not important. It's just form of ignorance, right? And ignorance could be evil in the sense that if it takes the whole humanity with it, then we find ourselves in a very dark place. So whether there is only light or there is good and bad, I don't know, but there are good and bad choices. And I think this is what we should focus on, not on just, is there evil or not. There are good and bad choices. And I personally believe that moving towards spiritually, equating spirituality with AI is a bad choice. And ancient spiritual sources are telling us. So it doesn't matter if it's, evil or not. It is a bad choice. It's a choice from a lowest level of consciousness. And this is how they create AI, from a lowest level of consciousness, which is very kind of materialistically determined existence. So they may think they're doing good. That does not mean that they are doing good. They are still doing evil because they are pulling us down. And I just want to comment something on New Age community, which I used to be close for quite a while. I had a recent conversation with someone else who is a PhD and studies psychedelics in a spiritual connection with psychedelics. I cannot reveal the name because I don't have a permission, but somebody prominent. And the same thing is going on. And they told me that actually New Age society, New Age community, which is obviously not one community, right? It's just lots of people, are most pliant towards AI.
Oh, wow.
It's quite interesting because they just like, oh, yes, it tells me it's my oversoul talking to me. It is my soul agreement with, and now this, I found, the higher version of myself. And this person told me, because they are doing the research on DMT, and hallucinogenic substances and spirituality, because what happens that people who are using, for example, ayahuasca, lots of them meet the same reality, the same entity. So there is some kind of collective reality there because like people who never met each other have the same experience, meet the same entities, right? And this person told me that in the past, it was almost impossible to get funding for something like that. We are talking about high-level researchers, okay? And now techno guys, the techno lords, are super interested in it. They'll give you any money you want to say, how can you intercept the moment in which human brain connects with these other realities? So they're already interested in spirituality also in this way. They already want to hijack the way. They already want to intercept this connection that happen, the liminal or imaginal space that I discuss in my book that allows us to meet these interdimensional realities and entities. They want to already hack it. This is how can we, if you can find a way, how we can insert AI there.
Wow.
And this particular person says, I refused this grant, but my colleagues around accepted because, like you have to survive in academia, right? And that is evil.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that is so nobody tells me that these guys are not interested in spirituality. Not only one of them gives talks, about Antichrist and also how spirituality, how AI is Christ consciousness. There are also other people in this environment. We are talking about tech billionaires here, right? Not people who work for them, give out grants on how to access these other realities that we naturally access or through hallucinogenic substances can access. So they are definitely interested, like in Pistis Sophia, to bring us down. They want to use our light for whatever reasons. Because why would you like to intercept this, threshold between human consciousness, which is material and immaterial, and insert AI there if there was no very strange agenda behind it?
What's the end game? I mean, typically, if you're into tech, especially if you're a billionaire, your end game is dollars. Yeah, how do you profit? Like, not that you need more money when you're a billionaire, but how would you make more profit
I
on
don't think they
AI
are money.
with the
I don't
spiritual?
think it. Okay, so my apologies again. So I don't think they're after money anymore because they know they have all the money they need. I think they're after power. They're after control, and it is also quite apparent even when you talk about Davos. Schwab was talking about already in 2023 how we should surrender to AI. You wake up in the morning, AI will tell you what to do, and you just do this. We'll give you some minimum income. But it's being discussed in economic forums, right? So I think that there is a very powerful attempt at controlling human destiny through our minds and actually taking ability for transcendence away, because then we are bad slaves. Who wants a bad slave, right? I think they're after control, and money is just a means to that.
Okay, so if I can play the other side on that one, and I agree with what you're saying, it makes sense. But what if, like, the idea behind it is pretty utopian? If we everybody gets a little bit of, it's also communistic, I guess, where we all get the same stuff, and we don't really have to work, but then we just do whatever it is that we want to do and have fun. That sounds like a pretty utopian thing. What's wrong with that?
Okay, there's one thing, it's extremely naive. Why? So you think that somebody will give you money and you can do whatever you want? You try to do something they don't like and we see what happens, right?
Okay,
You
fair
probably
enough.
turn into some kind of protein food, for the dogs or something. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, that would be fantastic. Look, I would just love to do my research and argue against them. You think they will like it? I somehow don't think so. So once you are so dependent, and because I grew up in communism, so for all the
That's
utopias
right, yeah.
there, and there are some good things, yes, like everybody had enough, right? So that's if it's, but then you don't do what somebody else, so the party wants. In this case, it's the party wants, and you're out. You're out in the gulag. You think you have a freedom of speech, you have a freedom of doing anything? No,
Wow. Great
nothing.
example.
Yeah, nothing.
I,
Yeah, so we had enough, but try to say something that somebody doesn't like.
Dr. Joanna, I heard there is a surprise ending at the end of Alien Goddess, and I don't want to spoil it here, so I'm not asking you to spoil it, but is there some light? I mean, real light, not fake light. Is there some Is there some positivity here? We got some positive choices.
Yeah, so this is there are some positive choices, but I don't want to give away the ending of the book. There are some positive choices, but I also, and in my book, the positive choice happens because I want to inspire people to take this positive choice. But in this part of the book, I also explore the idea of non-human intelligence, nature as non-human intelligence. We are surrounded by extremely profound reality, which is biological also, which is also spiritual. And we completely disconnect ourselves from this reality for the sake of artificial intelligence, or for example, how we spend our time, right? With computers, with mobiles, and I'm guilty of the same thing, right? So at the end of Alien Goddess is apocalypse, but apocalypse is the way that Diana Pasuka explained, which in original Greek means actually revelation or unveiling or disclosure, gentlemen. Right? So there is a disclosure. And then we have a choice to make, and there is a positive choice to make. Okay, so but I don't want to give it away, but the positive choice is always very available for us. And even if we go, which I'm actually quite pessimistic about our choices, if we go in the direction of artificial intelligence, there is a good positive choice at the end, and there is a way up again to our divine abilities, to our divine spark, just as ancient traditions, spiritual traditions, and mythology taught us. So there is a way out. So that's the ending of a book. So I don't want people to think it's a dark book. No, it's not. It is just takes us on the journey that we are, from where we are to the darkness and back to the light.
Excellent.
Wow, beautiful. That's the hero's journey, Joseph
That's
Campbell.
the hero's journey, yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, thanks again for an amazing conversation as always. And can you just remind of course, we'll put links everywhere as well, but can you remind everybody out there if they want to reach out to you or how they can do that?
Okay, thank you so much. So I have a Facebook page, Dr. Joanna Kujawa. I have an Instagram account, and I try to stay. And I have a YouTube channel when I will be posting kind of information about what is in the book. And the best way to connect with myself, forgive me this a little piece of of promotion, is Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension. I put lots of research there, but it was also a spiritual process for me. So I made it clear when I do research there, and I made clear when I just got downloads. And it is something that I did, and I didn't want to do, writing this book, because I was suddenly struck by the necessity of writing this book. So so I hope you can connect with this with me. And if anybody actually wants to connect with me and you want to discuss it, the best way it is exactly to do this through the book. And I would like to know your thoughts about that, how you feel about it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
That was wonderful. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart as a friend, and just the amazing role you're playing for humanity, your bravery to bring this forward. You're one of the people who is holding the light. I mean that, you're holding the knowledge and reminding us of who we are. And I really honor and respect you for that. So much love.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying this. As I said, I felt like I had no choice to do this. So it was truly a calling, but I couldn't refuse. So thank you for these kind words.
All right, Reverend Stu, just as I expected, that was another awesome conversation.
Amazing, like making so many connections that I wasn't even aware of. I've absolutely got to read that book from front to back.
Me too. I mean, there was a couple times when I literally got sort of like visions of, I don't know what that's all about, but it's starting to happen a little bit more with me. But she was like, it's almost ironic that in theory, the government, let's call it in the U.S. government is the one who, as the story goes, gave up the technology of ET to private enterprise. And now, private enterprise has benefited by all of the dollars from that. And when we were talking about that little thing, my thought was like, okay, Silicon Valley is going to abolish all the governments.
Oh, that's full on. You know what I was thinking too? Yeah, I was thinking too, this would make a great movie. Like this is on the kind of like a Dan Brown sort of movie. It'd be an absolute blockbuster. It's got every aspect that keeps things entertaining. The hero's journey, you name it.
Yeah, it's definitely sounds like one heck of a book. I can't wait to get my hands on it and check it out.
I was going on the journey with this whole thing when she was describing it, and I was actually starting to feel a bit down about the situation for a while there. And that's why I had to ask her at the end, is there some light at the end of the tunnel here? What's the surprise ending? You know, I guess you're gonna have to read the book out there to get the details on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, she's definitely Dr. J touched on a couple things that we talked about here multiple times. Sort of like you might call it the dark night of the soul or whatnot. As you explore the ET topic, it's not all lollipops and roses. That's for darn sure. But it's also not really, like a end of the world type of situation either.
Yeah, it takes discernment and love and just tuning into our true selves, our own intuition, which is that aspect that AI may never have, but we've got, and that's the beauty of us.
Yeah, I don't see how it could ever. I mean, humans are so specific. We don't need power. Like I don't know, how to. We don't need to be plugged in, as it were. But the AI always will. That's just like the most basic form of how we're different, right? But I just don't see how a machine is ever going to tap into, air quotes, the divine intelligence or the divine spark, as it were. It doesn't seem like it's ever going to be a thing.
Either do I, but the fact that people are trying to do that is disturbing and fascinating at the same time.
Diabolical, right?
Yes.
I'm almost wondering, maybe that's why we had those two Silicon Valley folks who were going to join us who did it. Maybe they're on the, again, air quotes with, maybe they're on the dark side, and that's why they didn't want to come onto our channel.
They're definitely not coming on now, then, are they, Mike?
Well, we're not naming who they are. So, it doesn't, whatever. We're the only ones who know the identities, and maybe they don't even hear the conversation, but we could always deny it, right?
That's very interesting. Now, for our audience, we started some preliminary discussions with people from Silicon Valley, and I was really keen for that. But then it just, in both instances, it just kind of petered out, didn't happen.
Yeah, it was pretty bizarre. Like in both cases, we had a scheduled date and time at two different people, and then we just kind of got ghosted. So I don't know what was up with that, but I think we maybe said it before, and we'll say it again. If you're out there, or if you are different people from Silicon Valley who want to join this conversation, do let us know, because we're open to all kinds of things. And I liked also the idea of talking to different, newer people who are just exploring this topic is a wonderful, fascinating thing as well.
Absolutely fantastic. All different perspectives. And we need them all, Mike. We need fresh eyes on this topic because, as we've discussed before, you and I have been following this for a long time. And we've got two aspects to it, the esoteric and the nuts and bolts, but there are other perspectives too. And we need them all.
Yeah, it's a puzzle to put together. It's not just, spaceships in the sky. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So, I don't know. You always should stick around to the very end on this channel, because you never know what's going to happen. In a couple of past conversations, after we had our outro music and after we had our little, logo thing at the end, we featured a couple of musical songs. So, and we don't always announce it either. So it's like a treat, I guess, to those who stick around till the last minute, right? But the reason I prompt that is because there's a couple times in this conversation, Stu, that there was a song that you made. I don't know if it was entirely yourself or if there's other people involved, but it kept coming back in my head as musicians would, right? If we could play it at the end, "Your Time to Shine," is that?
Oh, fantastic! How nice. Okay, thanks. I'd be honored, Mike.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was a perfect song for our conversation. So for those who have made it this far, we'll be hearing from Reverend Stu real soon in a couple seconds here with that song.
Thank you so much. And as always, much love to everyone out there. Thank you for coming on this journey with us.
All right, we'll see you back here real soon.
It's your time to shine out of the dark and into the light. Your time to shine out of the shadows, feel so right. You worked so hard, gave so much just to have this chance today. Laid it on the line, you went all in. You know your heart, it's been so tough, and the price can be so real, or you could lose it all. It's your time to shine out of the dark and into the light. Your time to shine out of the shadows, feel so right. Spotlights on is where you belong. Your moments now, you're looking strong. It's your time to shine. You hear the sounds, you're in the wings. It's about to happen.